Right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Overview of Scrutiny Management Committee meeting on the 5th of October 2022. I've been asked to just remind people on Teams of the protocol of if you're not actually asking a question or in action on the call, if you could leave your microphones muted and your cameras off, it would help greatly. Thank you. I just want to start tonight with a little bit of an update statement. Can you turn your camera off, please? Thank you very much. We asked all members of this committee prior to our first overview and scrutiny meeting of this year to tell us what you wanted from scrutiny. On top of that, we've also had a peer review which has highlighted opportunities to improve our scrutiny. An advanced sight of this draft was kindly shared by myself and the Vice Chair. It will be published shortly once it has been reviewed by the CLT and Executive. We were fortunate to have the opportunity to discuss the findings with one of the authors from the Centre of Governance and Scrutiny prior to the recent member training on budgets. All of this feedback and your original input has indicated that we have an opportunity to improve scrutiny in Wokingham. As a first step, we are working up a proposal to implement a more structured approach to scrutiny so that we get an opportunity for earlier engagement, take a more structured strategic approach across all of our scrutiny committees, do a fewer things better rather than a lot of things at a rush, and try to improve our constructive critical friend relationship with officers. Coming to scrutiny does not need to be like the Spanish Inquisition. We'll be looking to share this proposal at our next meeting. As always, any ideas or contributions that people wish to make would be most welcome. A key objective of developing a structure and consistency to scrutiny is that irrespective of possible annual member changes, that the structure will enable scrutiny to continue and to improve and to become more seamless. As a start to try and improve our scrutiny, the Chief Executive and Leader of the Council have agreed to meet for regular meetings so we can update on strategy and performance. These will start at 3 weekly, and we will feed back as these go on how they actually go as well. A quick reminder of what we should be aspiring to from these meetings. These are taken from the member scrutiny training session earlier this year. We should strive to provide constructive critical friend challenge, amplify the voice and concerns of the public, be led by independent people who take responsibility for their roles, and drive improvement in public services. I make no secret of the fact that I'm learning as a chair of this meeting, and from lessons learned and reviews that I have after every meeting, I'll be trying to apply a little bit more of a structured approach tonight. Andrew and Neil are going to help me identify those who want to speak, and we'll try to make sure we get everyone this time in order of hands raised. I would ask that questions and any supplementary questions are kept on topic. If you have more than one supplementary, then please ask these after everybody else has been given an opportunity to ask their first question. I have a proposal. Given the number of officers involved, I would like to propose that we move item 37, which at the moment is the last item on the agenda, the Barkham Farm solar farm business case, up the agenda to give officers early release from the evening if we can. Is anyone like to second that proposal? Thank you. Those in favour? Thank you. Any apologies?
Yeah, we've got apologies from Alison Swaddle, and Pauline Jorgensen is here as a substitute, and Stuart Monroe is attending on Teams.
Thank you, Pauline, for substituting. Minutes of previous meetings. Are there any comments on the minutes of the meeting from July? I have one, if I may. Neil, we had a public question which we've promised a written answer to, which is due to come later because we need to do some more prep work on it. Can we just put that on the action list so we don't lose it?
I think we did send a written response. And the question is sitting. Well, I'll check outside and yes.
Yeah, thank you. So can I see a show of hands to approve those minutes? Unanimous. And the last meeting where we cancelled due to the unfortunate departure, minutes are there just for protocol. Can I see a show of hands to say?
I sent apologies for that meeting because I was on holiday and Michael Firminger was meant to be attending on my behalf rather than somebody else's.
Okay. We'll add those. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Gregor. Any other comments on the minutes? Going to see a show of hands for acceptance of those. Again, approved. Thank you. Public question time. Oh, sorry, declaration of interest. Any declarations of interest? Thank you, Andy. Go ahead.
I've been appointed to the Barkham Solar Farm Board, so I won't be voting on this item.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? No, thank you. Public question time.
None received, Chairman.
Thank you. Member question time. We have one question from Gary Cowan. Not sure if Gary's online.
No.
He's not. So I'll read out the question so it gets captured. It's to do with the Barkham Solar Farm business case, which will be covered later on. Do you want me to read the question out then?
Please.
You are okay if we do that then, Sarah? Rather than now? As long as everyone agrees with that. Yeah, we do that. No other questions? We'll move on to item 31, which is the Q1 Corporate Performance Monitoring Report. Okay. I'll read it out and the written answer when we get to the item. Yeah, sorry.
Shall I start and introduce the Q2 Performance Monitoring Report?
Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. We've got officers on the call as well. We've got Emily, Will and Mark for this item. Sorry, it's the Q2 report, not the Q. This is the Q1 report, not the Q2 report. Apologies. So this is obviously from April, May and June. So this actually report covers the change in administration here at the council. We've gone from one municipal year into the next. I guess I just wanted to just introduce this by talking a little bit about the way forward as well with these reports and what we're doing. And I know there's an item later on the agenda about this, but we need to look at how scrutiny is involved in these reports. Sometimes we go a little bit deep dive into them and need to, there's some work going on with the Task and Finish group to look at how we get the most out of these. But this is obviously a backwards looking report. There's an opportunity to, I guess, look at lines of inquiry for future meetings, any sort of deep dive. It might be a case of recommending them for reports to specific scrutiny committees. But if you've got any questions at all, yep, we've got officers on hand. Please feel free.
Members, any questions? Lovely.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got quite a few questions. How would you like to handle it? Do you want them all at once?
Yeah, as you're the only one we had up at the moment, Pauline, go for it. We've put some pre-questions in as well, which I'll read out.
Okay. Right. The first questions are on the summary pages, page 18 and page 19. AS1 has got a target of 61% and AS2 has got a target of 87%. I was intrigued to know where these very precise targets came from and what was the basis for them being set like that. It's probably the first question.
Should I firstly ask, sorry, the page numbers you're using don't tally with the page numbers I've got here.
So
20 and 20.
Thank you. Could you? Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
So it's AS1, which has got a target of 61%, which is very precise, and AS2, which has got a target of 87%. I just wondered where the targets came from and how they were calculated.
Okay, no, that's fine. Officers online, I don't know what version you've got of the report, but this is the summary report that I'll tally it up. But are you okay, Will? Do you know where we're talking about here?
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, so I've got the pages in front of me. I can't answer specifically for the service. Targets are set by executive members in consultation with the directors and the leadership teams for each area. If we want some specific commentary, I'd need to take that away back to the service. The other thing just to note on this piece is obviously the adult social care KPIs do go to HOS on a regular basis. So if that question might be more appropriately asked there, but I'm more than happy to take it away if needs be.
Thank you. I mean, a written answer would be fine. Do you want the next question?
Yeah, go for it.
Page, well, on my page, it's resources and assets, top wins. It says the general upwards trends in leisure participation and the success of the Move with Confidence programme was a top win. But that seems to conflict with RA3 on page 19, which says the usage is down, and also RA3 on page 31, which says the same thing. So I don't quite understand how that's a top win. Yeah, I'm on the old agenda, not the new one. So RA3 on page 19 is on page 21 in your agenda. So
2 pages.
and I'm looking at resources and assets, quarter 1, 22-23 position, which is on page 26 on my agenda and 28 on yours, I think.
So which is the line in the top wins on the resources and assets?
It's the top line of the top wins.
The general upwards trend of leisure participation and
Yeah.
the success of the Move with Confidence programme.
Yeah. Which conflicts with the previous, in the summary, the statement that the use of leisure is slightly down on page 19 or your 21. So which is it?
So again, I think I can just give some wider context to that. If you look at the trends for RA3,
yeah,
from if we look at from COVID, which is obviously 2020, 2021, we've got a significant drop in that, and a general increase from then back through to quarter 1, where we've seen an increase. There was a small downturn from Q4 to Q1. So obviously that's the reason why that KPI has dropped into the reds and why we want to do some more work. The specific win there, I think, is around a couple of specific pieces of work which was successful and we want to celebrate. But we recognise in the detail of RA3 that there's still a challenge and we need to keep pushing forward.
Is that, so you think it's a temporary blip, do you, Will?
Well, if you look back to quarter 1 of last year as well, there might be a seasonal trend. It's difficult to tell. So we see for Q1, we've got a bit of a drop. There could be some seasonality just where, the spring starts, people shift out. We just need to there's a little bit of baselining post-COVID. The general trend, though, as we can see, is improving. There's a specific downturn from Q4 to Q1. Work needs to be done to make sure that's arrested and pushed back.
Okay, thank you.
But acknowledging the good work from 2 specific pieces of work there and in the resource and assets slide.
Thank you. So I was looking at, again, page 36 on my agenda, 38 on yours. It's got 9% eligible for free school meals, and I wondered what the criteria was for free school meals. Is that a standard criteria regardless of authority, or is that something specific to us?
I would suggest that's a question that goes to Children's Services overview and scrutiny.
Okay.
And I won't mind you, yes, Mark might be able to help on this.
I can give you, I can give you a response. It is a standard criteria nationally. which is income of around £17,000. I can't remember the exact figure, but it's standard national criteria, and people are able to check their eligibility on the government website. So it's the same right across the country for that. And we're trying to drive up take up of free school meals, because that supports pupil premium and also enables us to target our response to the tackling poverty strategy and the household support fund.
And is our percentage higher than the local authorities around about, or lower?
It's marginally lower.
Okay. And I thought CS3 on page 40, which is your 42, says it's getting worse, but actually I think it's getting better, or at least not getting any worse. If you look at the trend.
Sorry, is that CS3, did you say?
CS3, yeah. And likewise, A4 on recorded crime says it's getting worse, but actually it's getting better because it's the level of crime I think you're measuring, which means that if it's down, it's good news. So I just thought those two were probably mistakes.
So for CS3, we want the number to be lower. So the line going up is, and it is only a very fractional increase in the line, but a very fractional increase up is a little bit worse.
Looks flat to me, but okay.
It looks like it's going up to me.
Okay, maybe it's my eyes.
It is very marginal. We could argue with a bit of a tolerance, it would be the same, but
I think you're being unnecessarily critical of yourselves. And likewise, A4 PG1, I think that one's getting better. The numbers are going down, unless I've misunderstood the statistics.
that would be correct. Yes, we should have got the thumb going in the other direction.
Yeah. And likewise, PG3, it says there is a reduction in the number of placements made on the previous quarter. And yet it looks like that's going up. So I'm not quite so sure about that one. And I wasn't sure about PG5. What's a town contracted service? On PG5, what is a town contracted service?
I don't know. I'd need to ask the service for the specific details of the definition of a town contracted service.
Thank you. I think that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pauline. Adrian? Oh, sorry, Andrew?
Thank you, Jim. I have 4 questions, if I may. And the first one is in relation to CEX8, early resolution versus stage 1 complaints. It states that formal complaints often centre around problems with communication. What are some of the common examples, and in what ways does the new training address requirements of residents with specific needs, including those with different types of disabilities and for whom English may be a foreign language? We do have a written answer to this question, I think.
Just for clarity, both Andrew and myself put in advanced questions, which we have written answers to, which we'll provide copies here tonight for everyone. We'll read the questions out. If there's anything you particularly want to hear the answer read out tonight, we will do. But in the meantime, we'll share it all with you in writing.
And apologies, Jim, I would have done that if I'd known I was going to be here.
It's fine. It's fine.
So are you asking that the answers read out? Just hang on a second.
It's on the public record.
Yeah, so this is the question. So, Mark, this is obviously Sally's area. Do you want me to read out Sally's answer, or do you want to go through it, Mark?
Chair, well, if it's already been written down, it's on the public record, and I think just reading stuff that's already written out is a bit pointless. Be honest.
I don't disagree, Andy. But if there's anyone particularly wants to hear the answer tonight, then say so, and we will read those answers out. So does anyone particularly want to hear that one?
I would say in my case, so only if the answer then provokes you to have another question, maybe that in that circumstance, maybe, but otherwise we can read them, I suspect.
So my second question is in relation to CEX7. Overall customer satisfaction is RAG rated green, with a new approach being designed to set customer service KPIs. How is this currently measured? And can you share any details of how the new measures might be different? My third question is an overarching question that affects many parts of the council. The increasing complexity of demand on many of the service areas is reported repeatedly in our documents pack. Are there any specific areas of preventative activity that WBC would like to undertake, but have been unable to do so, or would like to prioritise going forward? Is there any empirical evidence of the cost and other impacts that this increased complexity is having on service delivery, including the quality of services, on staff, and on costs?
And just before, on that one, obviously that one was a very challenging question to answer. And it suggested that should the committee or one of the other subcommittees wants to, that would be more of a deep dive potential task and finish group for a group to really give a proper answer on that. So that might be something you want to discuss at the end or something. But yeah, just wanted to highlight that answer there.
And my final question refers to RA4. Does the return on investment portfolio include all of the council's commercial properties and all costs, including officer time, security, and maintenance of unlet properties? Can you please also give summary details of the profile of properties in the portfolio that are not currently let, such as numbers of any that have been untenanted for 6 months or longer, an estimate of the number of any that might require considerable expenditure to bring them into a lettable standard. In this instance, I would like the answer to be written out, the answer that was provided to be read out, because I may well wish to ask a supplementary question on this. Thank you.
I'm happy to read this out. Given the directorate sits in, I probably won't be able to answer the supplementary that you may have, but I'm happy to read this out. So the measure relates to the 10 commercial property assets held in the council's investment portfolio in accordance with the council's approved investment strategy. The rate of return is measured in the conventional manner, applying the passing rent to the total acquisition cost of the asset, therefore a reflection of the headline yield before allowance for debt, MRP and holding costs, if any. For the 5 single-let assets, the holding costs are 0. For the 5 multi-let assets, any holding costs vary according to whether or not any of the properties have unlet units from time to time. The running costs of multi-let properties are covered by a service charge fund contributed by the tenants, so they pay their own running costs. The landlord contributes only in respect of any unlet units. 2 properties are currently being considered for refurbishment to enhance the reletting of vacant units.
Yes, I do have a supplementary question, and I do appreciate that it may require a written answer. It has a number of parts to it. The first sentence of the reply that you read out suggests that the borough has a portfolio of 10 commercial property assets. I'd like confirmation of that number. It also says that the conventional manner is applied in the calculation of rates of return. That does not include, if I've understood it correctly, allowance for debt, MRP, and holding costs where those are relevant. So the second part of my supplementary question is it correct that the rate of return could be lower if those additional items were included in the calculations? And the final part of my supplementary question is, it's said that if the portfolio was fully let today at market rates, the rate of return would comfortably exceed 5%. What's the current figure for the number of properties that are not let? What tactics are being applied to bring these into use? And are there any types of property in the portfolio that for whatever reasons, may be of particular concern. Thank you.
Unless there's any officer on the call wants to answer that, I think you're going to have a written response.
Yeah, I think a written response will be good to that if we can, please. And it'll get published in a minute. I've got somebody online that's.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just going to say we're going to have to take that away and get a written response, definitely, from the service. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Adrian, you were next.
Yes, Chair. I find it very frustrating that we have different versions of the report. I understand there's very valid reasons for having different versions of the report. It's very confusing, and I would really appreciate that one of the officers present the report on the screens so we all look at the same thing, because I notice people around are looking at different versions of physical reports, different versions of online reports. We need to look at the same report when specific questions like the ones from Councillor Jorgensen are being made.
Just to clarify, it is the same report. The only difference in this agenda is we had that meeting on the 8th of September, so there were 2 pages of minutes from that meeting, which have changed the numbering slightly, but it is the same report that everyone's looking at.
Apologies, I completely understand your clarification. It's just the numbering on the pages, but it's very confusing to me anyway.
It confused me as well. Pete, you were next.
I'm fine.
Right.
I just had one question. It's on CEX 5 especially, which is on page 39 on the new report. It's just a bit concerning, the amount of voluntary staff turnover. I just wondered how that's impacting this service, and is there an update? Is that continuing, and how does it affect things? It seems quite a high turnover to me, which is troubling.
Great minds think alike, Norman. The question I asked in prep, and if you look at the ones there, page 17 or 19, whichever it is, makes reference to the Great Resignation post-COVID, and later gives a figure of 242 people, turnover figure. What actions are being taken to improve people retention rates? Would you like the answer read out, or are you happy to?
I can read it, I guess. Thank you.
If you've got any supplementaries, then please.
Shall I read it out for everyone's benefit? Yep. The retention of engaged employees who are able to deliver against the council's priorities and corporate objectives are taken seriously by CLT. To ensure corporate messages are disseminated throughout the business, there is a programme of communication which includes weekly SMT meetings, monthly ECLT workshops and Teams briefings to all employees from CEO or Deputy CEO, in addition to a monthly newsletter. Furthermore, annual staff engagement surveys along with regular one-to-ones and formal annual appraisals are undertaken, which provide the opportunity for managers and employees to discuss their achievements, objectives and to address any concerns the individuals may have. If that leads to any supplementaries you may want to ask.
I guess, we've had another quarter go by, so just how are things changing? Are things improving or getting worse? It just seems a large turnover, so it's quite troubling, I think, in terms of delivering the services that we want to deliver.
I agree.
Hi, so I'm afraid I don't have an update on the current figures, but we can go away and get an update into Q2 in the current position.
Okay, thank you.
About that.
Hey, Jim, thank you. Mine's also a supplementary. It's addendum to your question and also to Norman's, because I look at the response we've got here, which talks about formal annual appraisals and regular one-to-ones, and you kind of expect that in any reasonable employer. But when we look at CEX5 and CX6, which is the voluntary staff turnover, but also the levels of staff sickness, for sure there'll be things like COVID in there. But one hears anecdotally about the pressures and the stresses that staff are under. I do wonder whether there's something more strategic required here, which is actually a formal appraisal of is Wokingham actually a great place to work, and are we helping to produce high performing teams, rather than just the sort of stuff that I expect from routinely from good management.
I think it wasn't really a question, it was more a statement, really, wasn't it? So
I think so. I was going to qualify that as a question, then I think I'd like to see something come back from the chief exec to say, is there a programme going above just normal management work to actually really address the issues that Norman and Jim have raised about staff turnover and the levels of sickness, and to regard this as more of a long-term strategic project?
That's certainly something we can pick up and take back to a future meeting and look at the response from the staff survey and how that's actually driving the improvement around that. So we're happy to pick that up and bring it back in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list was Adrian. No. Gregor?
Yeah, just on CEX5, just to remind members, when we took on a whole load of voluntary staff for the COVID programme, when they were doing the swabs and stuff, while they were all volunteers, they were all technically employed by Wokingham Borough Council, so they were covered under our insurance policy. So if they had any accidents while they were out doing, they would be covered under Wokingham's insurance, even though they weren't actually paid staff. So within this figure from Q1 2021-22 through to Q1 22-23, there are a sizable number of staff members. I don't know the exact number. It won't be the full 242, but it would certainly be north of 100 that were employed as part of the COVID testing plan, that were voluntary staff, but were covered under our insurance, so they were considered staff.
Thank you for that, Gregor. If we could have some clarification on those numbers and that position.
yeah, so just to clarify with the requests that we've had, is this basically a written response you're after, or more narrative at the next report, or is it a paper that you actually want?
I think a written answer would be good.
A written answer.
Please.
Okay. Is that okay, Will?
Yes, of course.
Thanks.
Pauline?
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to suggest that there was a discussion along these lines at the Personnel Board last night, and it might be worthwhile joining those two things up. But the conversation in Personnel Board was more about agency workers, but there was also a conversation about permanent staff as well. So it might just be worth joining those two things up.
Thank you very much. Andy?
Thank you. Just going back to CEX5, can I suggest that when officers do come back with their comments, that they also include perhaps some comments from the trade unions which represent the workers here? I think asking managers what's going on with their management probably isn't going to give you the fullest response, so I would ask them to do that, please.
Right.
Yep, I'm sure that's fine, isn't it, Will?
I'll certainly do my best.
Cheers.
Some of the other questions, just for public record, that were asked in advance. Place and Growth states it's reviewing priorities and challenges with the new administration. We're now 3 months or now 4 months into the new administration. What update do we have on these priorities and challenges? There's a written answer to that. If there's any supplementaries on it. Right. Next question.
Could I just add a supplementary answer to the initial question? Is that okay?
Yep.
Sorry, because I'm conscious that that's actually an officer response as well, and that's possibly more about the new administration. So, obviously we do have very challenging financial circumstances, as all local authorities do and all businesses and individuals have. The importance is looking at what can be delivered with that minimal spend and still pushing things in those priorities through. So stronger partnership working, for example, obviously tackling the cost of living crisis. But there are other things with minimal spend that can be done, like obviously the violence against women and girls side of things. So we are able to pursue a lot of these things, but obviously everything is within the context of the financial circumstances. So I just wanted to add to that.
Next question asked in advance refers page 20, I think, on tonight's numbering, refers to the ongoing impact of the Ukraine crisis. I asked what are the figures for this ongoing impact, and there's a written response to that. Norman?
I presume the first sentence should be that the effect is still not known rather than known, I guess.
Yes. Andrew?
Yeah, may I ask a supplementary question on that? The written response says that the additional financial pressures are being met through central government funding allocations. Is it possible to have an update on whether that is still the case? Is this money flowing through in a timely manner, and is it covering all of the additional financial requirements?
Sorry, can I do a supplementary on the supplementary, which is to do with the Ukrainians? Actually, last weekend I talked to a few. We don't seem to have plans beyond the end of their when their rents are covered with their hosts. And I wonder if we know what resources we're going to put in place and get those costed, because all it says is we've got a problem. What we ought to have done is quantified that problem now, but beyond the projected end of funding. So there could be an option where the government pays, could be an option where they don't pay. But those things ought to be in here.
No, that's, I think that's a written response at this stage. It might be something that the committee might want to look at more in depth potentially. I don't have the direct answer to that. I mean, what I do know is there are obviously additional costs, sort of indirect costs on the council for this. So, for example, getting children to school comes out of our home to school transport budget, which obviously doesn't have the additional government money for that because of where we're placing children. So there are things there, but I think that's going to require further written response. And you may, as I say, you may decide to look at this in more depth, because obviously this is a big potential issue that the council needs to deal with. And I don't know personally where we are with that. It's not my portfolio. So
I think that answer is fair enough bureaucratically, but the Ukrainians, the time is ticking for them. And so we must act.
And I'm not saying that's not the case at all. It's just I'm not the portfolio holder for that. So I don't think we've got anyone on the call who is at the moment, but there might be, but we don't know. So we'll go away and find out for you, okay?
I think Graham makes a very good point there. And I have a supplementary to my own question as well. The report quite clearly indicates that we are financially strained because of the Ukrainian crisis, yet the answer states that the costs are currently being met by central government. Both cannot be true. If we're at risk going forward, then we need to know what that risk is. If we're not currently at risk, we're not spending direct budget because of the Ukrainian crisis, then it shouldn't be referred to in the report. Anything else on that one? Last couple of questions thing. Page 39 CXE4, officer competence going down. I've asked a similar question to earlier. What actions are being taken to improve competence? There is an answer there for any supplementaries. No. Page 45, PG4. Standard works orders, downward trend. Again, what actions are being proposed to stop that drop off? And finally, page 50, RA5, freedom of information requests at 83.5%. I've asked for the number of freedom information requests and what the trend is. Gregor, you have a supplement.
Yeah, just a supplementary on that one, Chairman. I'd be really interested to understand what the breakdown of those freedom of information requests are. So what subject areas within the council they apply to, I would be interested in what the sources of them are. So are they coming from members of the public? Are they coming from organisations? Are they coming from organisations that have an interest in our borough? And I'd also be really interested to understand exactly how much officer time is dedicated to fulfilling those freedom of information requests as well.
Is that something that can be answered tonight, or is that a written answer?
I think that needs to be a written answer, I'm afraid, for that one. But we could certainly look into it and get an answer on that that goes into the data you've asked.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
My reason for interest is purely because it seems like a very high number. And if there are consistencies, we should be dealing with what those consistencies are and putting more information into the public domain up front. And if they are coming from interest groups, we should be wary of that and understand what the implications of that are, particularly in relation to the amount of officer time that's dedicated to answering them.
Exactly why I asked the question in the first place. I think any other questions on the Q1? Thank you, Sarah.
Could I just end by saying that from a KPI setting process going forward, so for the 23 24 KPIs going forward, and we start that setting process, the scrutiny committees are perfectly within their rights to invite the exec portfolio holders to scrutiny to help and assist and challenge on the KPIs and the RAG ratings that are being set. So that's completely within your powers to do that, should you wish to do that, and you may want to consider that.
So the recommendation is that we note the performance report of the KPIs relevant to this committee. With no further questions, can we see a show of hands whether that's agreed? Anyone against? No abstentions. Thank you very much. Moving on to the item 32, and we'll come to item 37 after that. Climate Emergency Overview and Scrutiny Committee. This was discussed at our July meeting. A number of questions were asked. We've taken those questions away, and the report tonight provides answers to those. So we're looking for an agreement to say whether we set this committee up or not. Find it. Anyone wish to speak on this one? Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. An enormous amount of really commendable work has been done developing and implementing the Climate Emergency Action Plan. But as noted in last week's council meeting, there are huge and complex challenges, including closing the significant gap required for our borough to achieve net zero. A number of pertinent questions regarding the proposals for a Climate Emergency Overview and Scrutiny Committee were raised at our last meeting. The officer's written response to all of those questions suggests a Climate Emergency Overview and Scrutiny Committee would be practical. They also identified in their analysis a number of additional benefits of forming that committee. No reasons for not proceeding with a Climate Emergency Overview and Scrutiny Committee were identified by officers. Scrutiny of the Climate Emergency Action Plan by an Overview and Scrutiny Committee dedicated to that task, and that could also feed into future iterations of the action plan, is of such importance that I urge all members to support the officer recommendation before us. Thank you.
Anyone wish to comment? Pauline?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to ask a question of balance. If you're going to have an extra overview and scrutiny committee, that means there's another two people on the overview and scrutiny management committee. Does that require you to change the political balance by putting more Conservatives on it as well? Presuming that the chairman and vice chairman are not Conservatives.
Well, we will see who steps forward to be on it. And then if they're already on this committee, that might resolve the problem. If not, we'll give that some further thought and let you know.
Surely it shouldn't be a matter of further thought. Surely it's a matter of rules. This committee, I think, is meant to be politically balanced, and therefore you have to maintain it as being politically balanced, don't you?
Speaking of us.
Yes, so that we will aim to do that.
Thank you. But if there's no further comment, can we see a show of hands for those in favour of the recommendations? Those against? Those abstaining? Thank you. Sorry. As agreed earlier on, I now wish to bring up item 37, the Barkham Solar Farm, to give officers some respite from tonight. We can. This item has a part 2 to it. So if we get to a position where there are commercially sensitive topics being discussed, we will put, for those online, we'll put up a holding page. And for those here, members of the public will be asked to vacate the room for a little while those discussions go on. But we'll wait and see whether we get to part 1 or part 2. So any comments anyone would like to speak on this?
Well, can I introduce the report
Oh,
first?
sorry, Pauline. Sorry, Sarah.
And we've got obviously officer team online to answer some of the questions. So obviously the ground has shifted a little bit since the financial business case was approved through council. So obviously we've got change in interest rates, we've got change in the energy markets. And this is an opportunity to look through the financial business case as things like the moment with a consideration of, you know, what forecasts are looking like. I just wanted to remind everyone that this is specifically about looking at the financial business case. The planning application has been approved, so any things around planning are not for this meeting because it's already been through the planning process. So I just wanted to set that out. And yeah, if we could just be mindful with any of the questions that are asked if they go into part 2, so it's not just the answers, but also making sure we're very careful with the questions as well, because obviously we're out in the procurement process at the moment. So thank you.
Oh, sorry. Got a written question that we brought forward from Gary Cowan. I'll read that out first and the response to that, and then we go to David Gregor and one of the Andrews. Yeah. Right. This is a question from Gary Cowan. In the light of the current financial crisis and the interest rate rises, along with its impact on borrowing, coupled with the SSEN grid connection agreement set out in the report and the huge increase in energy prices, does the plan as reported fit in as the best available deal for Wokingham and its residents? Do you want to read the answer or do you want me to? All right. The written answer which we provided to Gary is, in light of the current rapidly changing financial situation, we reviewed the potential solar farm at Barkham in line with the revised potential rates of borrowing and increasing energy costs, as well as other financial implications for the project. We feel that the financial performance of this scheme is still very robust, as demonstrated in the papers submitted to this committee this evening. At this point in time, we still feel what has been considered thus far is the best available deal for Wokingham and for its residents. The business case of this project will be continually kept under review throughout the project in light of the changing costs and values to ensure that financially the Barkham Solar Farm measures up and continues to provide anticipated payback Importantly, we will also continue to ensure that it also achieves much needed carbon reduction for the council as part of the borough's stated net zero carbon reduction ambitions. That written response will be provided to Gary and will be part of the minutes. So we go to David first.
Jim, thank you. I appreciate this is a financial business case, but no business case is just financial because it's going to be heavily dependent upon the technical delivery of the solar farm itself. And I, for one, have no clue as how to evaluate the technical performance of a solar farm.
No, my comments were
Yeah,
related
hang
to the fact that it's not a planning thing. I just wanted to make that
yeah.
clear.
So in that regard, has this whole case been peer reviewed by people who do know about the topic? For example, Cambridgeshire County Council have had considerable success with solar power generation and got very good revenues from it. And it'd be interesting to know if we've had a peer review, and if not, why not?
Over to the officer team and be able to give some details.
Great. Well, thank you very much. In short, yes, we have had conversations with other councils who have delivered solar farms around their experiences. We've also employed consultant teams of expertise in this market and in the delivery of solar farms, first of all in designing the scheme up to where we've got now, but more recently in the appointment of a technical consultant who is advising us and guiding us through this process, because as you say, this is Wokingham's first large-scale solar farm, and it's key that we get this right. So we are engaging, we feel, with sufficient expertise within the market to make sure that we can deliver what our aspirations are around this farm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I have two comments to make that relate to the Part 2 papers, but I'm not going to reference any of the numbers that are in the Part 2 papers. It's purely asking questions about the area.
I would ask if the officers are happy to respond to those questions or would like to take it in part 2.
Depends.
Would you like me to say
what they? Yeah.
Would you like me to say what they relate to, please? So I would like to understand, because we've had some varying numbers in the past, what our confidence in the SSEN grid connection number is. Is it going to remain at this number? Is it this number plus or minus 10%? Or is this number actually the, I think, probably fourth of many? So I would like to gauge the confidence rather than talk specifically to the number.
I can take that question now, if that's okay. We have formally received and accepted a grid from SSEN, and we've made a down payment to secure that grid connection. So that is a fixed price that we are confident will not change from what is in our papers.
And so that number is now basically set in stone. It's not going to change due to inflation or anything like that.
No, that is fixed now.
Okay, in that case, I'd like to say congratulations to the officers that have managed to get this far, because it has not been a pleasant journey. I know David and Ian in particular have had a lot of issues in relation to this, a lot of questions that have come from me in the past as well. So well done. I think the other thing that I wanted to say on this, and I guess this is a question for Sarah, but also for the council as a whole, the cost of grid connection is making the viability of any solar farm and any solar project questionable, particularly some of the stuff that we want to do on schools and on the sides of buildings and in other areas. We as a council need to be, in my view, speaking with government, lobbying whoever we can possibly lobby in order to get control over the energy companies, to get control over these numbers, because it's a monopoly and they can charge whatever they want and we've got no choice. And in a world where we are pushing for more and more renewable energy, more and more solar farms, wind farms and everything else, it's not going to be possible while SSEN and others are charging numbers like this. So I guess the question that I would like to ask is, what can this council take action, please? Because this is going to prevent us from doing lots of things in the future.
Totally agree. And that's partly why we had the motion on the local electricity bill to look at that. But obviously it needs to be more than that. And this is further lobbying. I'd like us to be a campaigning council. And this is, I've actually, in the last couple of weeks, been talking, starting the conversation with officers more about what we do lobbying around climate change. This is one of those areas, as well as those statutory powers that we require. There's a whole raft of things we should be doing. And also, we have the opportunity to talk with our advisory board as well, their connections with government as well. So I think there are different channels we can use. But absolutely, we need to be lobbying on this. And I hope that everyone here will join me in that. Thank you.
I just seek some advice on that. Gregor, would you like to pose that as a recommendation from this committee, and then we can take it to the executive?
Chairman, I would love to propose that. I don't remember all of the words that I have said, but I think what I'm proposing is that this committee recommends the council starts to lobbying campaign central government and anybody else, including the energy companies, to make changes to the costs of grid connections going forward, so it becomes a viable option for councils and for individuals to do, not just us, because at the moment, in my view, it is a monopoly and it needs to be broken.
Is there a second for that?
I'm happy to second that.
Can we see a show of hands? Those in favour? That's unanimous plus. Thank you, Gregor.
Thank you, Chair. Sarah, in your introduction, you quite understandably referred to the very turbulent times, that we're passing through, and that this has had impacts on the business case since it was prepared. What wasn't alluded to, though, was if so, how some of those impacts may actually have impacted on the business case, and if officers are in a position to give one or two exemplars, I think that would be very, very useful. Because they must, these very difficult times must be having an effect on the business case.
Yeah, I'm sure David will be happy to take that, and Ian might want to come in as well, because obviously you've got the inflationary costs, but the cost of energy has actually changed this business case in a more positive way, if that makes sense. But I'll let David and Ian come in on that.
Okay, so there is some explanatory text within the note that accompanies the paper twos around the energy prices that we're using for the base case scenario, and we've been very prudent in what we are assuming in our forecasts. Market is showing a lot higher than what we have included, or the current market is showing a lot higher than what we have included in those forecasts. So there may be potential that the forecasts have actually improved over time from what we're actually presenting here. So I think that's what I would say in the first instance. Ian, is there anything you'd like to add?
You summarised it quite well, mate.
Okay, well, that's a useful example. Thank you for that. I have some other very specific questions. The next is in relation to interest rates. Are the interest rates on the loans variable or fixed? If they're fixed, what's the period of time for which they're fixed? Over what length of time will loans be paid back?
So the interest is intended to be paid back over the lifetime of the project. Mark, would you like to? Mark Thompson's on the line here from our finance team. Would you like to come in and explain the situation around that?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. In terms of the interest rate, so we've modelled in the papers today 3.5% interest rates. What the council wouldn't do in the current climate, and what we're speaking to our Treasury advisors about is because of the uncertainty in the market with interest rates, the council wouldn't lock in borrowing for 25 years. So what we would look to do is short-term borrowing, because that sort of takes away some of the risk and it doesn't lock the council in for a long period of time at a time when rates are at their peak. So what we do is with our Treasury advisors, Link Asset Services, they provide us with interest rate forecasts on a monthly basis, and these set out the different rates they expect that we can borrow from the government over periods of 5, 10 and 25 years over the next 3 to 5 years. So the forecast we received last week suggests that interest rates will start to come down slowly. I know there's a lot of uncertainty in ifs and buts with what happens outside of our control, but the suggestion is rates would slowly drop down to 4%, 3.5% in sort of 2 to 3 years' time, which is what we've modelled the assumptions on. So the paper you've got today is going with 3.5%, which we feel over a 25-year period would be an average rate that feels prudent at this point in time.
Okay, thank you for that. And that does seem to be sort of a very appropriate approach. I've got two other quick questions. Okay.
Given where we started, and I said that we would share the questions round, can we come back to you on that? Actually doing what I think I set out to do in the first place. This is good. Pauline.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not really familiar with electricity prices, but I've seen oil go below $20 a barrel twice in the last 25 years and also exceed $140. I wonder what the break-even electricity price that this project is planned at is. I know you're saying something in the paper about 5 pence per kilowatt hour will be all right. What's the actual break-even rate? And have you done anything in the way of hedging your project so that if it gets below that, there is no risk to the council? And if you want to go into part two, I understand.
Ian, do you want to take this question?
Yeah, I think in terms of energy costs, I mean, that is a bit of a crystal ball thing, unfortunately, but we've all seen what's happened literally over the last 19, 20 months. The financial model for the solar farm at Barkham doesn't really take into account the inflative measure of energy costs increasing. It was all pretty much calculated in advance of that. And where energy costs are going to is anybody's guess. I honestly can't see them coming down, certainly short term. And by short term, within the industry, I'd suggest a minimum of 5 years. In fact, if anything, government are gearing up for more assistance packages and aid in terms of energy costs. Especially bearing in mind what happened literally on Thursday of last week, with Nord Stream 1 and 2, which were operable and now aren't. So yeah, I think from that perspective, the financial model, I mean, we've without casting too many aspersions, we've stress tested that as best as we possibly can do, either side to quite a healthy degree, and we do think, as the response to Gary Cowan's earlier question alludes to, we do think it's very robust. It does stack up quite well.
Thank you. I'm not quite sure that answered the question.
Yeah, on that front.
Yeah.
Do you want
so
to
it's a 25-year project. In the last 25 years, oil's been below $20 a barrel twice. I would just like to know what the break even is so I can understand the risk. I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you. I'm just interested.
And on that front, I think, to be honest with you, what I'd like to do is, if you can give me the opportunity to go away and calculate that and come back with a written response.
Thank you. Norman, you were next.
Yeah, I've got 3 questions. I'll ask one. So the first one really is clearly the costs for building things and construction and so on have gone up quite a bit. Obviously, the price of electricity has gone up considerably as well. So what's said in all the answer to all the previous questions sounds so it makes sense. The one specific thing I have is that what is the availability of solar panels like at the moment? Is that are we going to get them on a reasonable timescale? to get the project into operation?
So we have done some market engagement already. There is a bit of a lead in time and a bit of an availability issue with solar panels, but part of our strategy for procurement is to enter into a two-stage design approach, so we can get to a contractor early, allow them to design and potentially pre-order any key items that we need in order to meet our timelines going forward. But yes, there is an issue within the market at the moment, and we just need to manage that as best we can as part of the project team.
Do you have any inclination on timescales, how much it might impact, or is it too early to say?
We think we're mitigating it with the approach to the procurement that we're taking. So we don't think the delays to obtaining the equipment will actually delay our aspirations around delivery programme, because there's a design process and discharge of planning conditions which we need to go through first before we can put a spade in the ground, and during that period we can really manage that process.
Okay, thank you.
Norman, you said you had two more, yeah?
Quite small.
Two from you and two from that.
Right. So what happens at the end of the 25 years? Do we know from other projects, have any of them matured enough to know that maybe actually we'll get another 10 years out of these panels that are commercial sort of income? Or should we be thinking about replacing them or allowing for the disposal cost in our appraisal? What's the assumption about what happens at the end of 25 years?
So the planning permission we have for the solar farm is for a 25-year period. It's a temporary planning permission that we have. If the decision comes that we need to remobilise at the end of that 25-year period, that will be a decision that will need to be made at that time, and that will need to work its way through the planning process as well. What we would say, that we anticipate that the cost of decommissioning the solar farm and returning it to agriculture, it would be cross-subsidised by the scrappage sums revenue that we would get from actually recycling the panels and the equipment that form part of the solar farm. So we have factored that into the appraisals.
Okay, and the final one I think is clearly sort of local power generation and power storage is a big thing these days. We see how vulnerable we are to world markets, so the more we can do locally the better, especially if we can make some money out of it. So should we be going ahead and looking at further schemes, large schemes, rather than just putting things on top of schools, for example?
I would draw your attention to the Climate Emergency Action Plan, and there's actually 3 further farms identified for the delivery as part of the Climate Emergency Action Plan. So we are in the process of identifying those other sites and doing the initial feasibility work to bring those forward.
Can I just come in there? Sorry, I mean, not all 3 of those will be able to come online during the current lifespan of the Climate Emergency Action Plan, which is 2030. So I think 2 further could be within that time frame and 1 potentially after. But it's a case of having a hybrid approach of looking at solar farms as well as this dispersed way of generating directly on buildings as well. So having a combination of the 2 is a good way forward and looking at both.
Great, thanks very much.
Thank you, Andrew, and then we'll go to Stuart online.
Yes, thank you. My next question develops further one of Norman's questions. As stated, the full term of the project is given it's 25 years. It seems from one of the answers that was given that this figure has been determined primarily based on the planning permission, but I'm still intrigued as to why 25 years. Is there any experience elsewhere, and that could be in the UK or abroad, where similar solar farms have had their lifespans extended or curtailed? And the reason for my question is how different might the business case be if lifespans of, say, 20 years or 40 years were used?
So as I said earlier, the planning permission we have is for a 25-year period. It was devised initially on the lifespan of the equipment, and that's what we were advised the lifespan of the equipment would last. And then at that time, you would need to look to replace the panels moving forward. There are examples, I understand, where panels have lasted longer than 25 years, so it may be possible come the end of the 25-year period that there is additional lifespan within these projects, but for the moment, for the purposes of the forecasting, we are forecasting the 25-year lifespan.
I think that's a very clear answer, and thank you for satisfying my mind on that. And the final question is, I don't want a technical explanation of sleeving, but I understand that this. I know Pauline's dying, to learn more about this, but I understand that that it would enable the output, some of the output, to come directly to WBC's activities. I don't want to ask about that. I can understand. I can anticipate what some of the benefits, of this might be. But my question very specifically is, are there any financial costs involved in sleeving? And if so, have they been included in the calculations?
Ian, do you want to take this question?
Yeah. There are. You don't want a technical explanation of sleeving, so I'll try my best. We have two options. Well, there are more than that, but effectively two big options available for the solar farm. Either we plug it into grid and retail the energy, or effectively we supply ourselves, and that really, in a nutshell, is sleeving. The energy doesn't directly come to the building, it's just a claim. We're putting it into the grid in one place, and technically, therefore, we can claim that we're taking it out at the other end. The only slight negative as things stand in terms of the sleeving arrangement is that you still do pay for something called TUOS and DUOS, which is transmission use of service and distribution use of service. In other words, using the cabling in between where you're generating and where you're taking the energy out. But to be honest with you, that is a technicality, and both business cases, and they are separate in their own right, financially stack up. As time has moved on in relation to energy, the conversation amongst me and my peers has more been around energy security. And I'm sure that you're going to start to see an awful lot of that in the media over the next couple of weeks. And that may well be where we go to with the solar farm. It might be that we do supply ourselves. But at the moment, that isn't determined.
But that's really helpful, Ian. Thank you.
Stuart, online?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Sorry I couldn't be there, but I had a meeting that backed up to the back of this one. A lot of the questions I was going to ask have actually been already asked, but I'm curious to find out how we're going to negotiate the unit cost that we get, the units price that we get for the electricity that we generate. Is that going to be some organisations can do it for us, Ian, David, or are we going to do this with some sort of a management company to do so? I think I heard mention of a solar farm board earlier this evening. It's a lot harder when you're not there in person, but could you comment on that? And also, the big thing about the sleeving thing, I understand, Ian, and maybe you correct me on this one. My second part really is: do we have to have batteries to take advantage of that, or is that taken care of as well?
Okay, so two things within what you said. The first is what we call a PPA arrangement, so a power purchase agreement, and effectively power purchase agreements. Solar farms are actually not new. There are a lot of them dotted around the countryside now, and power purchase agreement prices are out there on the open market. Again, we know what we can factor in now. Power purchase agreement costs are generally rising, so the more availability to get more a quicker or more payback for the authority. We've appointed a consultant who's advised on what we should be looking for in terms of technical specification for the PPA if we go down that route. Yeah, so I think again on that front we have stress tested that as well to a degree. So our figures are reliable. There we go. With regards to the second point around, remind me, it was sleeving in association to
Batteries.
batteries. So batteries are, we have a plan to install batteries with as part and parcel of this project. The opportunity, to be honest, this is going to sound dreadful no matter how I explain it. There are two mechanisms of doing solar PV, or there are more than two mechanisms of doing solar PV. Either you do naturally just a straightforward solar PV system, which energy generates, but it energy generates over a period of time, and you take advantage of that in one of the ways I've made clear, or you plug a battery on to the end of it, and all of that basically does is it extends the time frame from which you can utilize that energy. Both have a place here. Obviously, with regard to retail, the additional beauty with retail opportunities in terms of battery is effectively when I want you to think of this as when grid needs it. Okay, I'm playing slightly on words there, but if you imagine the halftime of the FA Cup final when everybody sticks the kettle on, those sort of scenarios are a little lessened nowadays. But when grid needs it, effectively grid can send out something called a dryad alert, and if you have the opportunity to feed into grid at that point in time, that's where payback becomes lucrative. So there are opportunities, and I don't want to get in. I really didn't want this to be a technical conversation, but basically what I'm trying to say is that batteries certainly will be considered and utilised, and that does allow us to extend energy generation opportunities and therefore revenue generation as a result.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stuart. Pauline?
Thank you. My sort of rusty recollection of solar panels is that they lose effectiveness at about 0.3 to 0.8% per year. Is that built into the revenue figures? And the second question, now that you've mentioned batteries, is what sort of batteries and what sort of life, and have you got the replacement of those in there? Because obviously, presumably it's lead acid, they'll last forever. Others may not.
So the depreciation of the panels over time has been factored into the forecasting, and in terms of the batteries, exactly which batteries we're looking to use, that will be a conversation that we need with our design and build contractor as we work our way through the process to actually really make those decisions about what are best for the project.
So presumably you're not assuming any upside from having batteries, so therefore the cost of keeping the batteries in a position where you can actually use them, and also the cost of transforming also isn't in there. So you've probably got a worst case. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, yeah, we haven't included battery storage in the forecast that we've currently got before you at this moment in time.
But you haven't included the benefit either. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Thanks.
Any other question? Oh, sorry, Andy.
Thank you. Just about the batteries. I have no idea really how big a solar farm battery is. So, I'm sort of gathering there are different types of batteries. So could you give me just some idea of the scale of the batteries, and does the current planning permission cover anything of that size that's likely to that might be put up?
Ian, do you want to comment on the size of them?
Yeah, so batteries in conventional sense come in the form of sort of effectively cassettes. They're normally on the size and type of system that we're talking about here. If you think of a shipping container, you're not far off in terms of size. But as I say, they are plug and playable, for want of a better description. So we can ramp up or ramp down battery storage literally by buying more or buying less.
In terms of the planning permission, no, there's not battery storage included in the planning permission that we've got at this moment in time. We can look to, with our design contractor, future-proof the provision of those, and then have conversations with our planning colleagues around the most discreet or the most sensible locations within the plots to house those. And any planting, etc., that we need to do to screen those from the wider landscape.
Is that a short shipping container or a long shipping container?
Depend. I mean, we're getting down into technical. Again, it depends on what if we're looking for you know, with this scenario, we're not looking for, as I say, we're not looking for battery storage yet. Were it to be embedded at a later point in time, what percentage would we need to have that? So when I say shipping containers, if my opinion is, you look at a bog standard shipping container in terms of size, and that would deal with on the size of the farm that we've got here. I don't know. Again, I'm clutching at figures. 20% of the energy generation, peak output.
That last bit wasn't my question, but thank you.
I think the size will really.
I was literally looking for a sense of the physical impact on the landscape. That's all.
Yeah, I think the size will really need to be determined through the discussions we have with our design contractor, and once we know what's best for the project in terms of overall delivery, that's when we'll be able to determine exactly what those sizes will be and exactly how we can place those within the landscape to minimise their impact externally. So I think the key thing for us is future-proofing the delivery or the facilitation of batteries on the site at this moment in time under the current planning permission.
And are there any other questions on part one? I've got a couple of questions on part two. Pete, part one, yeah.
Yes, I've got maybe an odd one. There's a solar farm being built just outside of Arborfield at the moment. I just wondered if there's been a comparison between the effectiveness of that solar farm and its costs and benefits with respect to the planned one here.
No.
No.
People keep figures very close to their chests. So yeah.
Right, so as there are a couple of part two questions, members of the public, if you'd
You read out the exclusion front of the agenda.
where is it?
Front of the agenda.
All right. Under section 100A, part 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meetings. Thank you, Tony. For the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act as amended as appropriate. So if you kindly leave us for 10 minutes, and if we can kindly take but it's very, very good discussion and debate. We have a recommendation which has just been voted on, and we'll just read that out, so for clarity.
In fact, I believe that there are two recommendations that will be going to the executive. The first recommendation is that the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee has reviewed and scrutinised the Barkham Solar Farm business case. They have asked officers for further information on a variety of matters, including calculation of break-evens, risks, savings in the swings in the energy market, pros and cons of split versus turnkey projects as examples of documentation and written answers that will come back from officers to be considered by the executive. With that caveat, the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee supports the Barkham Solar Farm business case and wishes and supports that this proceeds in a timely manner. There is a second recommendation, which was from Andy Croy. No?
Do you want to do it?
Mine was covered in part one before.
So it's covered in part one before. The recommendation was that we lobby. Yeah.
Was that vote unanimously in favour?
I asked for a vote of hands.
That's just Andy didn't vote. Oh, of course, okay.
He wasn't voting because he was conflict of interest or declaration of interest, sorry. Thank you. In that case, thank you very much, officers. You're now free to go to the local hostelry.
Thank you.
All right, back to the agenda. I wish help. Executive. I do forward. No. Thank you. Item 33. This was a proposal at our July meeting to set up a task and finish group to work with officers to look at better visibility of how our services are perceived by our residents. We've had one meeting on this topic, and I think there's another one due in a few days' time. The recommendation is that we set it up. So I'll read the recommendation. Page 57, thank you. 59. So the recommendation is the committee is requested to approve the establishment of a task and finish group to review the current performance management reporting process and its impact on service improvement and resident experience. Approve the draft terms of reference for the task and finish group, which is also applied in Annex A, and agree that the task and finish group will submit its report to the January 2023 meeting of the management committee. Anyone wish to speak on this? David?
Is January 2023 still realistic?
I think so. So, Andrew?
I think on David's question, it would be appropriate to just ask officers if they feel that that is still the case.
We can aim for January and then as time goes on, reconsider. Are we progressing?
If you don't mind me just coming in here, because obviously this is my portfolio as well. And it's important that this task and finish group works hand in hand with the service as well. And obviously this covers performance management and customer excellence and that combination there. And we have actually got a meeting tomorrow to look at the governance of this in a bit more detail. I'm not saying that January 2023 isn't feasible. I just wonder if we should leave that a little bit open-ended, because it would be a shame if this got rushed or adapted to fit in that time frame when actually some great work could be done here. So I think maybe if we had some flexibility there in case it was needed.
I think if we change the wording of that recommendation to report back, then if we can finish it by then, that I think some of the things we do in council take far too long. So let's set ourselves a target of report back, and then if we haven't completed by then, that's what the report will state. So that's a proposal for a change. Is there a seconder? Thank you. All those in favour of the proposal for change? Thank you. All those in favour then with that amendment to the recommendations to actually set this up? Against? Abstain?
Abstaining. I've been in 4, I think, task and finish groups, and I think it's going to be really difficult to do anything with this one. So.
Thank you. Thank you for your honesty. And the next item.
You're not allowed to ask questions. Can I ask why? No.
I've been in 4, I think, or 5, I can't remember, and on some of them you think you're sort of edging change, and that's the idea, isn't it? You give feedback to the executive and you hope to make change that way, and you give feedback to officers, perhaps influence them that way. And I think this is going to be really hard. It's going to be really, really hard to make an impact.
No, I understand. We've actually had some discussions already with the service area to actually make sure that this fits in. I've been on a couple of task and finish groups with you as well, and they've often sit sort of outside the service. We're trying to design this together so that Scrutiny and the service area feed in and actually complement and make part of that proper structured governance process. So obviously we'll see what happens, but I think there could be some confidence around this.
Polly.
Can I just interject from the other side of things, being one of the exec members that was on the receiving end of this? Actually, we found it really difficult because we weren't working closely with overview and scrutiny, and we were giving a guidance which suggested we could only have X KPIs and it could only be over Y period and it could only be this and it could be only that. And it got very prescriptive and it didn't bear any relationship to the performance of the organisation. So I would very much favour the way that Sarah's suggesting doing it, which is a collaborative thing that gets to meaningful statistics rather than statistics that follow meaningless rules that don't apply to everybody.
And we have done, as Sarah said, a lot of preparation to make sure that relationship is there from the start, and we just hope it works.
Sorry, Chair, could I just say, I think I've just worked out I've been on overview and scrutiny management longer than anybody else, because everyone's very new or has been on the executive. So I think every year that I've been on it, people have complained about the KPIs and how they're done, and they've been changed. And then the next group come in and they don't see, and it's like a recurring thing all the time. People are complaining about KPIs and they change all the time, and they never come out right. So,
no, Norman.
Can I just come in on that?
I've got to kind of agree with that, Andy. I think what we always do is go through this sort of process, and we want to simplify things and get down to the core KPIs. And then if we do that, then the scrutiny committee always wants more detail, more detail, more detail. So we end up in that sort of loop, and we've definitely been around that several times in my experience. I've been on the overview scrutiny management committee before for quite a number of years as well. Yeah.
Obviously, I've been on both sides as well, and I really feel sorry for Will and his predecessor. So no, appreciate that, and this is what we sort of. I think there's not enough understanding from members as a whole as to what these performance reports are for, and what we do with them, and how we scrutinise them, and what we're doing. And this is what we need to challenge. There is some longer term work going on when we get the new council plan in 2024 and how the KPIs form out of that. Obviously, we're going to have some new ones for 2023 as we do each year, which is why I suggested at the end when we looked at the Q1 report that it is a prerogative of scrutiny committees to actually look at that KPI setting process early on, because I found that a lot of the times we're challenging some of the KPIs that are actually set and how the RAG ratings are done. This task and finish group is looking at that customer voice specifically in that as well. So we're not just having production, but we've got that customer excellence piece that goes in there as well. So this is an opportunity to actually do something about this. But, you know, I think it's really important that scrutiny works hand in hand, as we said, with the service area, and we've been working really hard to make sure that happens. So I do feel optimistic, and hopefully we can prove Andy wrong.
We will try. Moving on to the next item, which is, if I'm not wrong, 34. Executive and IAMD forward programs. At the start of this meeting, I gave some indication of an attempt to try to put a structure in against scrutiny and to see if we can actually change it. So irrespective of member changes and makeup of the committee, that the process works and continues seamlessly. Part of that work and that proposal as we go forward, I think will change some of these forward plans to try to get down to a more strategic level and a fewer number of items, and to try to move scrutiny away from being a presentations which we question on the night to being a more strategic forward-looking activity. So as we go through these forward programs, just bear that in mind, please. Page 65. Are there any comments on the forward plan? Okay, sorry.
Chair, it may be a misprint, but firstly it says 23rd of September 2022 at the top of the executive forward plan, and then it just lists thousands of things. It used to say which meeting it would be considered by the executive at, but we don't seem to have any of that. So either the next meeting contains all of these.
There are some extras in there, though.
Yeah, that's correct. So there's been a subsequent publication of the plan. So a number of these items went last week. I think around the bottom of page 68, it should say October, but it doesn't. And that's when the October items start to appear. Annual report. So that's October onwards. So that's the stuff that you might want to think about. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out, Greg.
So the bottom of page 68 is where it says annual report. Those are the items going in October. So those are the ones you might want to think about from there onwards.
Yours is different.
It's a new agenda. The old one's running.
We have a typographical error. It's causing confusion.
Well, I couldn't see the problem.
How do we
So the bottom of page 68 on the latest agenda which starts with annual report. That's the first item that is October. The rest have already been to September.
So for clarity, we have annual report from the chief executive for the year. Oh, we go on.
So Callum has got some of the most recent published version, which is now handing round, which should help to clarify the situation.
Thank you.
Sorry to ask another stupid question. What, has it got a code or not? Some of these have codes, like WBC 1287. Does this line have a code or not?
Yeah, hold on. I'm trying to find it. Yeah.
It's blank on there.
It's blank on mine as well. But for the meeting, the executive meeting on the 27th of October, the first two items do not have a code on them.
If I could answer, Chair. I think this is most likely just due to the fact that we've had a change in staff, and it's just a teething problem in terms of actually following through with different coding and deciding how, you know, the ways of working are going to go forward. So it will be sorted out by the next forward programme, but it's definitely been logged on the system and it's all in order.
Thank you.
Right, so hopefully we're all on the now same agenda on page 4. The executive meeting of the 27th of October. Are there any comments or any? No. Moving on to the 24th of November, which starts on page 5.
Check. Can I just say, I can't help feeling that picking stuff to examine from this report is bad scrutiny, because we're not going to be able to add value to anything in this report because it's too late.
I'm part of what I said at the start, Andy, is that we've got a meeting, the 3-week meetings, and there's something I've discussed, but I'll raise that as a concern. Yeah. I think you're right.
I'm wondering if perhaps consideration could be given to looking at things to ongoing projects that the council has that will come up on this report in 6 months or a year's time, because that's where I think we need to be trying to add value.
Exactly where we're trying to get to. Pauline.
Thank you, Chair. It's the removal of 1302, adult social care strategy and social care futures, which is obviously pretty critical, intentional or accidental. It was in November 27th October 2022 on the original agenda, but it's missing as far as I can see. Oh, it's gone to January.
It's gone to January by the looks of it.
Thank you. Sorry, didn't see that.
Any other comments? We need to read them all. I'm not sure what the page number is now, but I'm going back to item 35, which is the overview and scrutiny committee work programmes. Should be page 77 and 88, I think. It starts with the 16th of November. Andrew.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, I'm working from the earlier version, of this, but I hope that's not going to affect my comments. So my understanding is that a number of the items that were originally scheduled for this evening will be moved to the meeting in November. I'm happy with that. I would like to propose, though, that at some point in this municipal year, that this committee considers asking Thames Water to appear before one of the overview and scrutiny committee meetings. I think it's up to us to recommend which the appropriate committee would be. In light also of some of the earlier comments about another utilities provider, I would also like to suggest that not necessarily together with Thames Water, but that at some point Scottish and Southern Electricity be invited before a committee, as many of us will have had experience dealing with both of those utilities, and it would be very interesting, to work with to provide some scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I would very much like to support Andrew's suggestions. I think they need to be in separate meetings, ideally. But I'm also on the town council, and the town council is very, very frustrated that Elmsfield is still not sorted out from, I don't know, 6-9 months ago when the lorry fell into the hole with the broken sewer there. And we obviously have another very serious situation in Evanders Lane, which our colleague is up to a neck in it. Hopefully not the real stuff. But yeah, I'm very keen to talk to Thames Water about these incidents, and also obviously the nature of the I would say the Victorian sewers that we have in Wokingham, and whether they're still fit for purpose and what their predictive maintenance is, and all those kind of questions. But getting on to this point of SSEN, I'm really shocked and saddened to hear in this committee the original price tag for the connection to the Barkham solar farm was 14 million, which is a ridiculous sum of money, which was then renegotiated down to 4 million. That is, I find extraordinary. So I completely agree with Andrew's comments that we ought to get both those parties in and grill them.
And what do we invite them to come and do? Sorry, Graham.
I echo Andrew's intention behind asking Thames Water and SSE to come in. It needs to be somebody not just from the comms team, though, because if it's just going to be somebody from corporate relations or the comms team, it's completely worthless. All they're going to be able to do is come along and talk about, we're spending £5 million updating the water network, and aren't we wonderful? When we start asking them questions, they're just going to look at us blankly, promise us the world, and not deliver in terms of answers. If it's not going to be somebody senior enough to actually genuinely answer the questions, it's not worth inviting them in.
Adrian?
I think Gregor makes some great points as well. I totally support Gregor. It's an executive level, I agree, but it's also technical, because we need to ask some technical questions about their maintenance and their investigation procedures for the sewers. So I would like to see, that our request is a really comprehensive request, asking for executive and technical resource.
First Pauline, then Andrew.
Couldn't agree more. I've found the best way of getting information out of Thames Water has been the ops director, actually, so that might be a good place to try.
Andrew?
I believe that one of the neighbouring local authorities may have asked Thames Water to appear before one of their scrutiny committees recently, and if that's true, I think that we should hold discussions, with them to see how they approached it. I totally agree with Gregor's point, and I would envisage the invitation to be for a team of participants from Thames Water and Scottish Southern, because there will be a variety, of different matters that we will wish to question them on.
Any other comments?
Just a very quickie. When I was in children's services, we summoned the schools commissioners in, and we had the promise of Dane. I think you may have been there, Andrew. And they sent along 2 newbies who were ex-teachers who couldn't do it themselves, and so therefore they were in the schools commissioners. It was a complete hash. So we might get treated with contempt, and we must be prepared for that.
So the recommendation is that we invite both of those organisations with a clear message that it has to be people that can provide us with the detail and be the decision makers that can make a difference to our residents. Adrian?
In the HOST committee, we were asking for dentistry services to, because there were several questions around dentistry, and it took us, I believe, something like 18 months to get dentistry in, and we got the owner of the service from the NHS England, and so we thought we got the right person. And his report was totally unsatisfactory. But I think, you know, if we may need to do a lot of spade work with this. It may not be a quick thing. I would rather be a bit patient and get the right people in the room rather than rush it through and get totally the wrong people in the room.
So that's the proposal. If you're happy, Neil and I and Andrew will draft up something and we'll send it round the members, and then get some feedback into how we're going to do that, and we'll try to do some of that groundwork to do that. Can I suggest that if we do invite them, that we have a set aside meeting rather than try to bring it in as part of some of the stuff we have on the forward plan, if people would agree to that. So the recommendation is that we invite these people, these 2 organisations, to come and sit before Wokingham Overview and Scrutiny. Probably.
I'm chancing it a bit, Jim, but bearing in mind the remit of community and corporate, I'm just wondering if you might invite community and corporate to come along as well to that meeting.
Yeah, Andy?
If it's going to be a separate meeting and there's not going to be any sort of meaningful vote on what they say to us, is it worth considering like a Teams or Zoom meeting? We might be more likely to get them to come along to that, depending on where they are.
Discuss it, but we'll put something together, and I don't mind which scrutiny meeting it goes to, because I think it's just important we actually get them and sit down in front, eyeball them.
I'm not suggesting it goes to community and corporate. I was just suggesting maybe a joint OSMC and community and corporate meeting.
Yeah, I'm quite happy. Adrian?
This may be a red herring, but certainly in relation to another third party situation I had, I suggested that the council withhold funding for that service until questions were answered. So if we don't get any sort of cooperation at all from these organisations, I don't know whether we could investigate if we can start to communicate that we may not pay our bills or something that really hits them financially, because sorry, but I mean, it may seem bizarre, but it certainly motivated the other third party to actually really take action.
I think there's benefit in the fact that we are aiming to be an open council, that if we don't get any cooperation, we openly tell our residents that we're not getting any cooperation. But back to the proposal. All those in favour of inviting these people, these organisations, and we'll draft something together for that invite and send it out to all members. Thank you. Where am I?
It's still on management.
Still on management. 700.
Sorry, Chair. There was obviously an item missing from the ONS Management Committee, which was the Q2 performance monitoring reports, not on any of them. And I can't remember if it will be November or January. November. So that's not on there at the moment, but should be.
And then just go through.
So page 78, we've had a comment there for November's meeting. We'll add that to it as well. Page 79 on my numbering, the 18th of January. Any comments on that? Moving over to page 80, 20th of February. Yep.
Sorry, I think because we've got some other business which is going to overflow into these meetings, these are all effectively just a draft. Is that the way I'm understanding it?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
So before I move on to the children's activity, the items we've discussed plus the items that in addition to this forward plan, I'd just like to see if there's an appetite, should it be needed, to have a meeting in December as an extra. Now, whether that's covering all of the things on here or whether we can actually get Thames Water and SSC in there, would there be an appetite? Should that be required? Just a general show of hands, if it's okay. Anyone against? Right, so if we need to, then it's agreed. We'll try to keep it short. 25th is free for most. Children's services. Page 81. Again, hands up if there's any comments. 4th of January, page 82. 22nd of March. Corporate and community and corporate overview scrutiny committees. Provisional was 17th of October.
Sorry, can I just ask one on the children's one?
Sorry.
With the travel assistance policy, is that going to include the costs and analysis of travelling between schools? So we have people from Roos Hill going to Montague Park. So is that being looked at?
It will include homeschool transport. Yeah. Sorry. It will include homeschool transport.
Right. Community and corporate, 17th, page 83. 26th on page 84 of October. 3rd of November. 29th November. 19th of December. The health on the 7th of November. 25th of January. And the 27th of March. Comments? No. We're now on to action tracker. I had the comment earlier about we'll check with the member of the public to make sure it's a written response, but if not, we'll add that to it. Any comments on the actions contained? Any updates required? In that case, page 103 says, thank everyone for coming tonight. Thanks for your time. Thanks for how tonight's gone. I think it's been very, very good scrutiny meeting, and we'll look for the improvements as we go forward. Any other business from anyone? Thank you very much, everyone, and good night.